Welcome to the Phil and H Travel Podcast. Is it worth it? Imagine you are looking at a map of Indonesia. You drag your finger all the way down, past Bali, past Lombok.
Past Sumbawa, Flores, yeah. Just keep going.
Right. You go all the way down until you are looking at the absolute southernmost point of the entire archipelago. You're like practically brushing up against the Timor Sea.
Yeah.
Just a stone's throw from northern Australia.
Yeah, you were pointing right at Rhode Island.
Exactly. Rhode Island. And we are looking at it right now because, well, we're sitting at this fascinating, precarious tipping point. The years 2026 and 2027 represent the exact moment this island stops being this fiercely guarded secret among hardcore surfers and just steps right into the brutal glare of the global tourism spotlight.
It's a profound geographical and economic shift happening right in front of us, and it's not happening gradually either. It's being violently catalyzed by one specific event that happened back in May of 2026.
Right, the opening of the NIHI luxury resort, a 25-villa, ultra-premium footprint just dropped right onto Boa Beach.
Yeah, which is a massive, unprecedented injection of high-end, billionaire-class infrastructure onto an island that, frankly, still doesn't even have a direct flight connection from Bali.
Which creates this incredible tension right now. On one side of the island, you have these world-class, empty surfing waves and, dirtbag backpackers happily living on sub-$30 daily budgets.
Totally.
And on the other side, you have guests paying over $1,000 a night. And all of them are colliding head-on with an incredibly awkward 2-day journey to get there, a very thin medical cover, and a harsh weather system where half the island just padlocks its doors and shuts down for the season.
It really is a masterclass in travel contrasts. You have this glorious dry season from April to November, which creates this absolute surfer's dream of offshore trade winds.
Beautiful.
But then you have the wet season from December to March, where the sky just opens up, dropping up to 95% of the island's entire annual rainfall, turning those dirt roads into mud and shutting the entire local economy down entirely.
So we have to ask the ultimate question right up front, I think. Who is this island actually for?
Right.
It is for dedicated, obsessed surfers. It is for couples who are seeking genuinely quiet, empty beaches. And it is for patient, independent travelers who do not mind a high degree of logistical friction.
But, and this is a huge but.
Yeah, this is the most crucial caveat we will offer today. You should absolutely skip Rote if you are on a tight timeline, if you have any pre-existing conditions that require reliable health care right on your doorstep, or if you are expecting the easy transport, the massive beach clubs, and the thriving nightlife scene of Bali. If you're planning a trip and want the honest, is it worth it verdict before you book, follow the show on Spotify or Apple.
Because our mission for this deep dive is to pull back the curtain entirely. We are going to break down every single logistical layer, every hidden cost, every aviation fee, and every travel trap waiting for you.
We're covering it all.
Exactly. We're going to analyze the very real structural barriers that protect this island to figure out if the massive payoff of reaching Rote is actually worth the considerable friction it takes just to get through the front door.
I want to tackle a massive contrarian claim right out of the gate because it's driving a lot of the hype right now.
Yeah.
And according to our sources, it is completely dangerously wrong.
Oh, the Bali comparison.
Yes. You see, Rote currently being marketed heavily on social media and in glossy travel magazines as the next Bali. And everything we are reading says that framing is not just a little bit off, it is fundamentally a lie.
It is a profound mischaracterization. It just sets travelers up for a miserable vacation. When people hear the next Bali, they picture Canggu or Seminyak maybe 10 years ago.
Right, a little less developed, but still easy.
Exactly. They picture a place that possesses that seamless, full-service infrastructure, easy scooter rentals, endless smoothie bowls, yoga studios on every corner, and, most importantly, an international airport where you can land and be on the beach in an hour.
Which Rote is not.
Not at all. The term hidden gem is thrown around so casually in tourism brochures, but that entire concept collapses the second you look at the raw logistics of Rote. It isn't a hidden gem by choice. It's hidden because it is protected by a massive, imposing wall of harsh logistics.
Let's break down that wall because the aviation realities alone just kill the next Bali comparison immediately.
Precisely. Bali thrives because it has Ngurah Rai International Airport. It has direct wide-body flights from Dubai, London, Sydney, Tokyo. Rote has 0 direct international flights. None.
0.
In fact, it doesn't even have direct domestic flights from the major Indonesian hubs. You cannot fly direct from Jakarta, and you cannot fly direct from Bali.
So how do you get there?
The island relies on a single tiny airstrip that can only handle small propeller planes or light regional jets. And that single daily flight, which originates from the neighboring transit island of Timor, specifically the city of Kupang, is just infamous.
Infamous how?
It is routinely subjected to delays stretching anywhere from 2 to 5 hours, or it just faces outright unexplained last-minute cancellations.
Hold on, if the flights are that terrible and there are no direct connections, why the sudden rush of global attention? Why is Rote suddenly on the cover of Condé Nast Traveler?
Because of what the hospitality industry calls the NIHI effect. When NIHI Rote opened on Boa Beach in May 2026, it didn't just add 25 eco-villas and tree houses to the island, it completely altered the gravitational pull of the region.
Right.
To understand this, we really have to look at their other flagship property, NIHI Suma, on a neighboring island.
I want to dive deep into that because the NIHI Sumba story is legendary. It started as this remote, hardcore surf camp called NIHI Rote, right? Just a couple of shacks on an incredible wave called Aussies Left.
Exactly. And then it was purchased, rebranded, and injected with massive capital to become one of the most exclusive resorts on the planet. Nightly rates in Sumba routinely exceed $1,000 USD, often pushing much higher.
Wow.
The NIHI effect is like introducing an apex predator into a closed biological ecosystem. The luxury resort doesn't just sit there quietly. It immediately and violently alters the DNA of the island.
Walk me through how that apex predator alters the ecosystem. What actually happens to the local economy the day a resort like that opens?
First, you see extreme, aggressive land speculation. Suddenly, dirt tracks leading to empty beaches are being bought up by foreign investors and developers from Jakarta. Land prices skyrocket overnight.
Which makes sense.
Right. Second, the local labor force shifts. Fishermen and farmers are suddenly incentivized to become hospitality staff, drivers, and security. But most importantly, extreme price inflation begins to bleed out from the resort into the surrounding villages. Where NIHI goes, the entire economic baseline of the island is pulled upward.
Which creates a mind-blowing economic contrast right now, today, on Rote.
Okay, let's unpack this, because the price spread we are dealing with tells the whole story of this weird transitional phase the island is in.
Oh, the numbers are wild.
Currently, an independent backpacker can comfortably live on Rote for roughly $25 to $35 a day. That covers absolutely everything.
If you take the fast ferry from Kupang, it costs about 10 to 15 bucks one way. You can rent a basic budget bungalow, a short walk from the surf, for $18 to $21 a night. And yet, just a few miles down the road at the very top of the food chain, you have an NIHI villa that will likely cost more for a single night than that backpacker spends in an entire month.
It's staggering. You have these two entirely distinct, wildly divergent worlds trying to coexist on a patch of land that doesn't really have the public infrastructure to support either of them seamlessly yet.
The analogy that comes to mind is this. Imagine walking into a remote, dusty, rural town somewhere in the desert, and suddenly a billionaire drops a flawless, state-of-the-art mega mansion right in the middle of it.
Right.
The mansion itself is perfect. It has imported marble, air conditioning, private chefs. But the second the billionaire drives out of their gates, they are hitting dirt roads. The local ATMs are completely out of cash. There is no rideshare network, no hospital, and the local grocery store only sells basic staples.
Exactly. The private infrastructure has radically leapfrogged the public infrastructure.
That is a perfect encapsulation of Rote in 2026. The infrastructure outside the resort gates simply hasn't caught up to the investment inside the gates.
Which leads to our first non-negotiable rule of thumb for anyone listening to this deep dive. If you are looking at your calendar and you have fewer than 6 or 7 nights total for your vacation, skip Rote entirely. Do not even attempt it.
Wait, really? Even if you just want a quick, 4-day surf strike mission?
Absolutely skip it.
Yeah.
The 2-day transit through that Kupang bottleneck, which we will detail extensively later, will consume so much of your itinerary. You will spend 2 days getting there, surf for 1 day, and spend 2 days getting back.
That sounds awful.
It is. A short trip to Rote isn't a vacation. It just turns into a miserable, anxiety-inducing transit exercise.
So, assuming you have the time, say, a 10-day or 2-week window timing, your trip to Rote isn't just about getting a slightly better tan or avoiding a rain shower. From what our sources indicate, the island operates on a very hard, incredibly unforgiving 2-season rhythm.
It is entirely binary. There is no subtle blending of seasons here. Let's analyze the dry season first, which is the absolute peak season for tourism. This window runs from April through November.
Okay, so that's a pretty long window.
Yeah. During this time, the climate is incredibly stable. You are looking at daily temperatures sitting very comfortably in the mid-80s Fahrenheit, which is around 28 degrees Celsius. You have very low humidity and almost negligible rainfall.
But the critical element during this dry season isn't the temperature, right? It's the wind.
Precisely. The defining meteorological feature of Rote's dry season is the consistent east trade winds. These winds blow directly offshore across the west coast surf breaks.
And for anyone who isn't a surfer, an offshore wind is basically the holy grail.
It is. It blows from the land out toward the ocean, hitting the face of the incoming wave. This grooms the water, holds the wave up, and creates those perfectly shaped, hollow, glassy conditions.
Wow.
This specific wind setup is what creates the surfer's dream window, turning the famous T-land left-hander at Nemarala Village into a mechanical, incredibly reliable rave.
Okay, so April to November is paradise. But then the switch flips. December through March is the wet season. And our sources don't just call it low season. They treat it like a literal warning label.
And they should. It is not a casual tropical shower in the afternoon kind of wet season like you might experience in Bali or Thailand. It is a deluge. It is a structural shutdown.
How bad does it get?
Up to 80 to 95% of the island's entire annual rain falls in just those 4 months.
Way.
Yeah. The humidity skyrockets to oppressive levels. The winds shift and turn on shore, which destroys the surf quality, turning the ocean into a messy, choppy washing machine. You even have the rare but real possibility of tropical cyclones sweeping through the Timor Sea.
But the real danger for a traveler isn't just getting wet, is it? It's what the rain does to the economy. It's the closure trap.
That is the crucial insight. Because the weather becomes so severe, the ocean becomes so hostile, and the tourist numbers drop to near zero, the local economy simply goes to sleep. Many of the Midrange resorts, the surf camps, and the local homestays simply shut down. They lock the gates, cover the furniture, and use those 4 months for heavy seasonal maintenance, repairing the damage from the previous year.
Let's put the listener in that scenario to really explain the mechanics of this trap. Say I'm a digital nomad or an independent backpacker who loves winging it. I'm used to traveling through Southeast Asia, where you can just book a flight to Bangkok or Ho Chi Minh City in January, land, open up an app on your phone, and find a dozen cheap guest houses instantly.
Right.
If I try that exact strategy on Rote in January, what actually happens?
It is a recipe for an absolute disaster. If you book that unreliable regional flight in January, manage to endure the delays, and step off the plane en route without a solid confirmed reservation, you might literally find yourself dragging your suitcase down a muddy, unpaved road in a torrential downpour, knocking on the doors of guest houses that have heavy chains and padlocks on their gates.
Oh, wow.
Your first, second, third, and fourth choices might be completely abandoned. There is no backup infrastructure to save you. You cannot just walk into a brightly lit Starbucks to use the Wi-Fi and figure it out. You will be stranded, wet, and incredibly vulnerable.
That is terrifying. So if we rule out the wet season entirely, what does this mean for booking during the dry season? When should you actually go to get the best experience without fighting 100 other people for a wave?
There is a beautiful sweet spot that most casual travelers completely miss because they are constrained by traditional holiday calendars. That sweet spot is May, June, and September. During these specific months, the Indian Ocean is still pumping solid, consistent groundswells toward the island. You still have those perfect, grooming offshore winds. But the crowds are noticeably, wonderfully thinner than the absolute peak.
And the absolute peak is July and August. Why those 2 months specifically?
It comes down to geography and demographics. Those 2 months align perfectly with the Australian winter school holidays. Rote, because of its proximity to the northern coast of Australia, pulls a massive, dedicated Australian surf demographic.
That makes sense.
Yeah, they are looking to escape their winter, and Rote is a relatively short haul for them compared to flying all the way to Hawaii or Central America.
And what does that do to the vibe in the water?
It changes the dynamic entirely. During July and August, the lineup in the water at T-land gets genuinely competitive, crowded, and occasionally aggressive. You have dozens of highly skilled surfers fighting for the peak of the wave.
So it's busy.
Very. On land, the better bungalows and the popular surf lodges in Nemarala will fill up weeks, sometimes months in advance. The restaurants are full. The quiet frontier feel is temporarily suspended.
What about the absolute fringes? The shoulder months of April, October, and November.
Those are the value months. They offer incredible opportunities for the budget-conscious traveler. The weather is still highly favorable, though the winds might be slightly lighter or less consistent than in August. but the prices ease up significantly.
Because there's fewer people.
Exactly. Because occupancy drops, you can often negotiate your nightly rate directly with the homestay owners, extending your stay for much less money.
I want to talk about the concept of crowds for a second. Because when we say road case crowded in August, we have to be careful with our definitions. We aren't talking about the kind of crowds you see in Seminyak, Bali, where you have thousands of people shoulder to shoulder on the sand, right?
Not at all. The pressure on Rote is entirely hyper-concentrated. The crowds are almost exclusively focused on a very small geographical footprint, Nembarala village, the Tilan surf break right out front, and the nearby Boa Beach, where the NIHI Resort and a few other premium properties are located. That is the hub.
So if you just walk a mile down the road,
It's empty. If you move away from that specific West Coast surf strip, if you go to Ba, which is the main town and the primary ferry port, or if you rent a scooter and drive to the eastern beaches and the traditional salt pans, you can walk for hours along long stretches of pristine, beautiful sand, completely alone.
even in August.
Even in the absolute peak madness of mid-July, the eastern side of the island feels completely undiscovered. Plus, there is a massive structural blessing here. Zero cruise ship pressure. Rote does not have a deep water port capable of handling massive cruise liners. You will never have a scenario where 3,000 day trippers suddenly descend on the village for 4 hours and ruin the atmosphere.
Okay, so the booking strategy really shifts depending on who you are and what you want. If you are a hardcore surfer, you have to target the dry season and just accept the crowd trade-off in July and August because that's when the waves are most consistent.
Yeah.
If you're a couple wanting peace, romance, and empty beaches, you should aim for May, June, September, or October. And the budget backpackers can gamble on the shoulder months to score the best deals.
Correct.
So what did this all mean for booking? When do you pull the trigger?
When you are mapping out your actual booking timeline, the rules change based on the season. For a trip in July and August, you need to lock down your accommodation 2 to 3 maps out, minimum. Do not leave it to chance. For the shoulder months, booking a few weeks out is usually perfectly fine.
Here's a question about the economics of the island. Do the flight and ferry prices fluctuate wildly depending on the season the way hotels do?
Surprisingly, no. What's interesting is that the transport pricing remains fairly flat and consistent year-round. This is because it operates on capacity-based pricing, not demand-based pricing.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, the ferries and the local airlines have a fixed capacity, and they serve the local population as much as, if not more than, the tourist. So the massive swings of 30 to 50% that you see in a traveler's budget happen purely in the accommodation and hospitality sector.
There is one crucial ironclad rule regarding timing that our sources stress repeatedly. Never, under any circumstances, plan a surf session or a non-refundable activity for your arrival day en route.
Never, because the connection through Kupang will almost certainly let you down. The unreliability of getting onto the island means you must always build in a massive psychological and temporal buffer. If you expect to land at 2 p.m. and be in the water catching waves by 4 p.m., you will spend your entire travel day stressed, angry, and ultimately disappointed.
Which brings us perfectly to the actual mechanics of getting there. Let's talk about first impressions and the two-stage reality of this journey. This transit sequence really sets the tone for the entire trip, acting as a massive psychological filter. Let's trace the exact steps. You're sitting in Bali. You cannot fly to Rote directly.
No, you can't.
First, you have to get to the massive, rugged island of Timor, specifically to the provincial capital city of Kupang. The airport code is KOE. Usually you are doing this on a domestic flight via Wings Air, Batik Air, or Citilink out of Bali.
And Kupang is where the great logistical gauntlet begins. Kupang is a bustling, dusty transit city. It is not a tourist destination in itself. From Kupang, you are presented with 3 distinct doors into Rote, and we need to detail every single one of them because every single price point and physical mechanic here matters deeply for your budget and your sanity.
All right, let's open door number 1.
Door number 1 is the fast ferry, operated by a company called Express Bahari. It leaves from the terminal Hilong ferry area in Kupang at roughly 9:00 a.m. every single day, weather permitting.
Okay, 9 a.m.
Yeah. The journey across the strait takes about 2 hours to reach the port town of Ba on Rote. An economy ticket, where you are sitting in a large air-conditioned cabin with rows of seats, will run you about $10. A VIP ticket, which gets you slightly wider seats and perhaps a marginally colder air conditioning vent, is roughly $14 to $15.
And what if I have a surfboard? Because that's why most people are going.
This is the massive advantage of the fast ferry. If you have a massive, heavy surfboard bag, the cargo fee on the ferry is only about $2. The deckhands just strap it to the roof or stack it in the back.
Okay, so that's door number one. What's door number two?
Door number two is the slow ferry. This is the local heavy lift roll-off ferry that transports cars, trucks, and bulk supplies. It usually leaves in the afternoon. It is a grueling, slow, 4-hour journey across the strait.
Yikes.
Yeah, it only costs about $4 for a passenger ticket. You are likely sitting on a rusted metal bench or just finding a spot on the deck.
Yeah.
The single bonus here for dirtbag surfers is that they generally load surfboards for free on the lower car deck.
I have to push back on that. You're telling me I should sit on a hot, rusted, slow-moving car ferry for 4 excruciating hours
Yes.
after I've already flown internationally to Bali and domestically to Kupang just to save a few bucks. Is that really worth my vacation time?
For a traveler with a 2-week vacation, absolutely not. It is a terrible trade-off. But if you are a 22-year-old backpacker on a 6-month trip through Southeast Asia and your budget is literally $20 a day, saving $10 on a ferry ticket equals 2 full meals. Time is the one currency the backpacker has in abundance.
Fair enough. What about door number 3, the sky route?
Door number 3 is the flight, specifically Wings Air Flight IW1937. It is a tiny 30-minute hop from Kupang over the water to Rote's tiny airstrip, airport code RTI. The base ticket is relatively cheap, usually hovering around $65.
But there is a massive structural catch to this flight, isn't there?
There is. First, they charge a predatory surfboard fee of around $62 for each board. We will break down the absurd mechanics of that fee later, but it essentially doubles the cost of the flight.
Wow.
And second, as we mentioned, this specific regional flight is highly, highly prone to 2 to 5 hour delays or just outright cancellations because they don't have the aircraft availability or the crosswinds at the tiny Rote airstrip are too strong.
Here is where the Kupang bottleneck really traps people. And it's a brilliant lesson in how uncoordinated infrastructure works. That fast ferry, door number 1, the comfortable 2-hour boat that only charges $2 for a surfboard, leaves at 9:00 a.m.
Yep.
But the vast majority of inbound domestic flights arriving from Bali don't touch down in Kupang until 10:00 a.m., 11:00 a.m., or later in the afternoon.
Which creates a fascinating structural reality. This timetable mismatch acts as a natural, incredibly effective filter against mass tourism. Because you cannot make a same-day connection from Bali to the fast ferry, almost every single traveler is forced to spend a night in Kupang.
Oh, man.
They have to leave the airport, hire a taxi, check into a transit hotel, sleep, wake up at 7 a.m., and take another taxi to the ferry terminal.
It's exhausting just talking about it.
But that single, exhausting logistical hurdle is the primary reason mass tourism hasn't swallowed Rote whole. The inconvenience actively protects the island. If they ever synchronize those schedules or build a runway on Rote capable of handling direct Bali flights, the floodgates would open instantly, and the Rote we are discussing today would vanish within a year.
When you finally endure all of that, and you step off that fast ferry onto the docks at Ba, what is the actual feeling? Our sources describe it like stepping out of a time machine.
That's incredibly accurate. The vibe shift is immediate and palpable. Once you make it across the water, the chaos of Bali and the dusty hustle of Kupang just evaporate. You hire a driver for the 1 to 2 hour drive across the island to the surf hub of Numberala.
And it's pretty regulated, right?
Yeah, if you pre-book a local transfer through your homestay or a service like Rote Guide, it's a flat, highly regulated $18. If you took the flight and landed at the little airport, a private car to a Numberala hotel is only a 15 to 20-minute drive on quiet roads.
And what's missing is just as important as what's there.
Exactly. There is no hustle. When you walk out of the ferry terminal, there are no aggressive touts grabbing your bags and demanding tips. There are no massive predatory scooter rental scams waiting for you. There is no gridlock traffic. The roads are quiet, dusty, and flanked by pigs and chickens. It is a significantly slower, incredibly friendly, older era of travel.
Oh, but you do hit an immediate friction point right there at the ferry terminal in Ba, the ATMs.
Yes. The ATMs in Ba are notoriously unreliable. They're often completely out of cash, or they are just offline entirely due to rolling power blackouts.
Which is stressful if you need cash for a cab.
You have to understand the mechanics of remote banking. On an isolated island, digital money is easy, but physical paper cash has to be delivered. It is brought over in secure boxes on the exact same ferries you just took, subject to the exact same weather delays. If a storm halts the ferries for 2 days, the island's cash supply physically dries up. Cash droughts are structural, not accidental.
Which means if you don't bring a massive stack of rupiah with you from Kupang, you are in deep trouble on day one. But let's table that because we are going to dive deep into that specific trap later. Let's move to accommodation. Because the spread of where you can sleep on this island is uniquely, absurdly wide.
It really is.
We are looking at a 4-tier split that ranges from shoestring survival to staggering, unimaginable luxury.
Let's walk through those tiers, examining what you get and, more importantly, what you sacrifice at each price point. First, we have the backpacker and budget tier. We are talking $18 to $25 a night. You will find these places clustered mostly in and around the dirt roads of Numberala Village small, family-run homestays, or slightly older budget camps like Villa Santai.
Paint a picture of what $20 a night actually buys you in 2026.
You are getting a very basic room, likely with a woven palm or corrugated tin roof. You are getting cold water showers, which frankly is fine when it's 85 degrees outside. You are relying on a ceiling fan or a very weak, rattling air conditioning unit. And you will experience occasional, sometimes daily, power cuts when the local grid gets overwhelmed.
But there is a massive overriding upside to this tier, isn't there?
Geography. You are paying for proximity. These budget places are deeply embedded in the village, which means you are within walking distance to the wave. For $20 a night, a solo dirtbag surfer can wake up at 5:30 a.m., grab their board, walk down a sandy path, and be paddling out into the lineup at T-Land right as the sun comes up. No scooters, no logistics, just pure access.
Okay, let's step up to tier 2, the mid-range couple tier. This jumps to roughly $50 to $110 a night.
Here we are looking at established, comfortable properties like Malo Rote Surf House or the Lualemba or the Rote Surf Resort bungalows. These are generally clustered right on the Numberala beachfront strip or just slightly set back.
Sounds a bit nicer.
Oh, for this price point, the quality of life jumps significantly. You get reliable, cold AC, often backed up by the property's private generator. You get a swimming pool to lounge by when the tide is wrong for surfing. And a solid, hearty breakfast is usually included in the daily rate.
But there is a distinct trade-off to this mid-range tier that people need to understand, especially if they're coming from Bali.
Right. You do not get the vibrant, walkable street life of a place like Canggu or Seminyak. On Rote, mid-range means limited on-site dining options and very few alternative restaurants within a safe, easy walk.
So you're stuck.
Kind of. The village is spread out and incredibly dark at night. So once the sun goes down and you've had your sunset beer, you are pretty much locked into your property for the evening. If you want to eat somewhere else, you have to navigate pitch-black dirt roads, dodging stray dogs and potholes on a scooter. Most mid-range travelers just end up eating at their hotel every single night.
Which naturally leads us to tier 3. The family tier. This revolves entirely around the full-board resort model, with properties like the Numberala Beach Resort being the primary long-standing anchor.
The full board model is a completely different beast. You are essentially buying an all-inclusive compound experience. They provide 4 massive buffet-style meals a day to keep surfers fueled. They handle all your daily surf transfers, loading your boards into a boat or a custom 4x4 vehicle and taking you directly to the break so you never have to paddle against the current.
And transfers.
Yeah, they arrange your complex by ferry transfers seamlessly for about $30 each way.
And the pricing structure for families here is fascinating because it's so rigid. Break down the math for a family traveling with kids.
It is highly structured. Children aged 2 to 11 who are sharing a room with an adult cost $45 a night if they are strictly non-surfing. But if that 10-year-old wants to surf and use the boats, the rate jumps to $65 a night. Kids 12 and up are considered adults and pay the full adult rate. Infants are generally free.
Let me ask you this. Why would a family pay these premium full board rates when they could just rent a mid-range bungalow for $80 a night and buy cheap noodles in the village?
Because the value proposition here isn't about saving money, it's about buying certainty. Improvising logistics with young children on a remote, infrastructure-poor Indonesian island is utterly exhausting.
I can imagine.
Right, trying to find a warung that has food your kids will eat while navigating a scooter with a toddler sandwiched between you, while worrying about stray dogs and power cuts.
Right.
It turns a vacation into a stressful logistical nightmare. Buying that all-inclusive, full-board certainty removes a massive amount of daily friction. You wake up, the food is there, the boat is waiting, and you can actually relax.
And then we reach tier 4, luxury and absolute comfort.
This is the tier that fundamentally altered the island's trajectory in May 2026. NIHI Rote on Boa Beach. This is 25 eco-conscious, architecturally stunning villas and treehouses, private plunge pools, dedicated butlers, immaculate landscaping, and direct private beach access.
It sounds incredible.
It is. If it follows the economic template of its sister property, NIHI Sumba, we are looking at nightly room rates starting well over $1,000 before you even begin to add in the full board dining packages, the private surf coaching, and the luxury spa experiences.
Here's where it gets really interesting to me. If you book NIHI, you are paying ultra-premium Maldives-level resort island prices. But you are essentially buying a highly pressurized bubble.
That's a great way to put it.
Because the physical reality is, the moment you step off the manicured resort grounds, the public infrastructure is exactly the same as it is for the $20 a night backpacker. It is still just unpaved dirt roads, spotty power lines, and cash-only local food stalls. The island outside the massive wooden gates hasn't caught up to the staggering luxury inside the gates.
That is the defining paradox of Rote right now. And geographically, Boa Beach, where NIHI is located, is somewhat isolated. It is not walkable to the main hub of Nembarala. You cannot just stroll out of your $1,000 villa and walk to a local cafe for a change of scenery. You are completely dependent on the resort's arranged, air-conditioned transport.
Which is a stark, fascinating contrast to Nembarala, which is highly walkable and integrated. That extreme contrast between the walkability of the budget tiers and the isolation of the luxury tier is the defining characteristic of Rote's current development phase.
Absolutely.
Let's shift our focus to daily life on the ground. Let's talk about food, groceries, and etiquette. Because you have to eat. And the food scene here is small, it's highly localized, and if you know where to go, it is incredibly cheap.
If you are a traveling foodie looking for destination dining, molecular gastronomy, or a street line with 20 different cafes serving artisanal sourdough and matcha smoothie bowls, you have absolutely chosen the wrong island. But if you are willing to eat exactly where the locals eat, and eat what the locals eat, the food is incredibly honest, flavorful, and remarkably affordable.
Nembarala Village is the culinary hub, such as it is. What are we actually looking at when we walk down the main dirt road?
You have a loose cluster of local warongs, which are essentially small, family-run food stalls or modest restaurants, and then you have the dining rooms at the Midrange surf lodges. Names like Warong Mia Rote and Warong Mbak Jawa are absolute staples for anyone looking for authentic, daily Indonesian food.
For the listener trying to build a spreadsheet, let's run the exact granular numbers, because to me, they are fantastic.
Let's do it. A massive steaming plate of nasi goreng or mie goreng, which is the classic Indonesian fried rice or fried noodles, usually topped with a fried egg, at a local warung will cost you exactly $1.60 to $2.20. To calibrate that for the local currency, you are handing over about 25,000 to 35,000 rupiah.
For the price of an overpriced, mediocre latte at an airport Starbucks, you're getting a massive, freshly cooked meal.
Exactly. If you want something more substantial, like a piece of freshly caught charcoal grilled fish served with a mound of rice and steamed vegetables, you are looking at $3 to $5.
Wow.
If you have been surfing all day and you are desperately craving a Western-style meal, like a thick beef burger with fries at one of the surf lodges, the price jumps slightly to $6 to $10. A strong local Indonesian coffee is just $1 to $1.50. A large bottle of drinking water is 50 cents. And a cold bottle of bintang beer to drink on the beach while watching the sunset is roughly $2.50 to $3.50.
That sounds incredibly cheap. But you have to be careful, because you noted that groceries are a completely different story entirely. Why the massive disconnect between a $3 fresh fish and a box of cereal?
It comes down to the brutal mechanics of remote island supply chains. Because of Rote's extreme remoteness, the island produces very little manufactured goods. Almost all non-local goods, packaged foods, and imported products have to be shipped in via those exact same ferries we discussed from Kupang, which in turn receive them on ships from Java or Bali.
So every step adds cost.
Exactly. Every time a box changes hands or gets loaded onto a new boat, the price goes up. That means imported snacks like Pringles, quality reef-safe sunscreen, tampons, or imported toiletries carry a massive, sometimes 300% premium over what you'd pay in Bali.
So a smart move is obvious.
The smart move is to buy all of your sunscreen, your specialized snacks, your protein bars, and your toiletries in Kupang, or ideally in Bali, and stuff them into your luggage before you cross the water.
Let's touch on cultural etiquette, because this is a massive blind spot for people who think all of Indonesia acts like Bali. Bali is a predominantly Hindu island that has had 50 years of mass tourism to become highly accustomed to foreigners walking down the street in bikinis with a beer in their hand. Rote is not that.
Not at all. Rote is a deeply conservative, predominantly Christian island with very strong traditional local customs. The cultural baseline is completely different. Away from the immediate beachfront and the surf breaks, you absolutely must dress modestly. Walking through the village or going to the local market in swimwear is deeply offensive. You need to wear a t-shirt and shorts or a sarong. Furthermore, you should always ask permission before taking photographs of the locals, especially older people or children.
What about tipping? Does the American tipping culture apply here?
Interestingly, no. Tipping is not culturally expected in daily transactions at warongs or local shops. You don't need to leave 20% on your $2 plate of noodles. However, it is highly appreciated and increasingly normalized for specialized services, specifically for local surf guys who take you out on the boats or drivers who navigate the dark roads for you.
I want to issue a very serious health warning that our sources flagged regarding the food scene. If you have strict, medically necessary dietary limitations, or particularly if you are a strict vegetarian or vegan, how difficult is Rote?
Outside of the high-end, highly adaptable resorts like NIHI, your options are exceptionally painfully thin. The local diet relies heavily on fish, chicken, and eggs. If you're vegan, you're going to be eating a massive amount of plain white rice, boiled plain vegetables, and tempeh every single day.
That gets old fast.
Yeah, the concept of a varied plant-based menu just doesn't exist at the local warong level. Also, standard tropical food safety rules apply with absolute rigidity here because of the lack of medical facilities. Stick entirely to sealed, bottled water for drinking and brushing your teeth, and ensure everything you eat is freshly, thoroughly cooked in front of you.
If we extrapolate on this, it's fascinating. The food scene isn't just a list of restaurants. It is a direct physical reflection of the island's isolation.
That's a great way to look at it. You are essentially eating exactly what the island's geography can naturally sustain or what the local economy can easily and cheaply import. It grounds your travel experience in the harsh reality of the location. You aren't getting a simulated, frictionless global menu designed to comfort you. You are getting the raw reality of Rote.
That perfectly sets up our next major section, the daily budget. This is where the true value case for Rote is either won or completely lost. We are going to break down the exact USD line items for each of the 5 types of travelers we identified. Listener, grab a pen. Let's start with the backpacker.
For a dedicated backpacker, Rote is one of the last great deals in global surfing. A backpacker can realistically survive and actually thrive on $25 to $35 a day total once they are physically settled on the island.
Break that math down for us.
Okay, $18 to $25 for a bed in a fan-cooled homestay. $8 to $12 to cover 3 hearty local meals at the warongs, $4 to $6 to cover a shared scooter rental or paying a local for a quick pillion ride to a different beach, $3 to $6 for a modest older surfboard rental or a daily beach access fee if applicable, plus a crucial $3 to $5 daily buffer for an extra water or a coffee.
Okay, next up is the mid-range traveler, the couple who wants air conditioning but doesn't need a private butler.
They're looking at spending $70 to $110 per person per day. That assumes a couple is sharing a $60 to $110 room, meaning their individual bed cost is $30 to $55 per person. Their daily food budget jumps to $15 to $25 as they mix cheap, local warong lunches with more expensive dinners at the surf lodges. Dedicated scooter rental and fuel is roughly $5 to $8 a day. We add $10 to $20 a day to cover an activity, maybe a boat transfer out to a reef break or a local fishing trip, plus a $10 daily buffer for incidentals.
For a family of 4, we established that they essentially have to buy into the full-board resort model for their own sanity. How painful is that math?
It scales up quickly because you are multiplying every cost by 4.
Yeah.
A family should realistically budget roughly $250 to $400 a day all in. That means a standard one-week trip will total between $1,800 and $2,800 just for the on-the-ground expenses. But remember, you must factor in the complex flights from Bali to Kupang and then on to Rote, which will easily add roughly $400 to $700 per person in transit costs before you even check in.
And then the luxury tier, the apex predators at NIHI.
If you are staying at NIHI Rote, you are operating in a different economic stratosphere. You are looking at $1,200 and up per night purely for the room. Realistically, for a couple indulging in the full board dining, the spa, and the daily private experiences, you are seamlessly spending $1,500 to $2,500 plus dollars every single day.
Finally, we need to touch on the digital nomad budget, though our sources attach a massive flashing red caveat to this demographic.
We do have the numbers. A month on Rote will cost a frugal nomad between $900 and $1,400. That breaks down to $400 to $700 for a heavily negotiated long-term homestay room, $300 to $450 for food, $80 to $150 for a monthly scooter rental, $30 to $60 for local SIM cards and data workarounds, and a $150 buffer.
But cost isn't the problem for nomads, is it?
No. Cost is irrelevant because connectivity is the absolute non-negotiable deal breaker here. Rote is a terrible, highly stressful nomad base because the internet infrastructure is profoundly unreliable. The local cellular towers frequently go down, the power grid drops out. If your job requires you to be on a stable, high-definition Zoom call with a client in New York at 9:00 p.m. local time, you will inevitably lose that client.
So looking across all of these disparate budgets, from the $30 dirt bag to the $2,000 luxury couple, what is the one thing that almost everyone consistently underestimates when they are doing their living room math?
The hidden, unavoidable front-end transit costs. People look at the $20 homestay and think the trip is cheap. They completely forget to account for the mandatory Kupang transit hotel night, the airport taxis in Kupang, and the staggering Wings Air surfboard fees. Those three things alone can blow a tight budget completely apart before you even see the ocean.
I want to stop and talk about the utter absurdity of that Wings Air fee. You mentioned it was roughly $62 per surfboard per flight. Think about the physics of that for a second. You are paying $62 to fly a piece of shaped foam and fiberglass for exactly 30 minutes across a tiny strait of water. In many cases, if you buy a promotional fare, that board fee is actually higher than the price of the human passenger's ticket sitting in the cabin.
It sounds absurd, but you have to look at the aviation mechanics. Wings Air flies ATR-72 propeller planes. The cargo holds on these aircraft are incredibly small and uniquely shaped. A 7-foot, heavily padded surfboard bag takes up the volumetric space of 4 or 5 standard passenger suitcases. The airline isn't pricing the board based on its weight. They're pricing it based on volume displacement. Every surfboard they load means they have to leave high-paying local cargo or multiple passenger bags behind. It is essentially a penalty fee for taking up too much space.
That makes logical sense, but it still feels like highway robbery when you're standing at the check-in counter. But the flip side to all these nickel and dime travel costs is that once you actually arrive on Rote, the absolute best assets the island possesses, the pristine, empty beaches and the perfectly shaped ocean waves, are completely 100% free.
Which brings us perfectly to the core of the traveler's anxiety, the 3 named logistics traps. These are not just minor, funny travel inconveniences that make for a good story later. These are structural, trip-ruining barriers that require deliberate, meticulous pre-trip due diligence, or they will completely derail your vacation.
Let's build out the escape room analogy because I think it's the perfect way to visualize this trip. Traveling to Rote is exactly like being locked in an intricate escape room. The island is the final prize, but to get there, you have to solve a series of sequential puzzles, and the first puzzle is just getting through the front door.
Let's solve trap number 1, the Kupang overnight. We touched on this timetable mismatch earlier, but let's formalize the brutal math. The 9:00 a.m. Express Bahari fast ferry leaves the dock before the vast majority of Bali flights even begin their descent into Kupang. You physically cannot connect on the same day via the cheap, reliable sea route, so you are trapped in the city.
And what does that trap actually cost the traveler?
It costs you cash and it costs you time. That mandatory transit hotel in Kupang will cost you $20 to $45. You have to pay for a taxi from the airport to the hotel and another taxi from the hotel to the ferry terminal the next morning. You have to buy dinner in Kupang. But the real cost is temporal. It burns 2 entire half days of your precious itinerary just sitting in a transit city waiting for a boat.
So what is the fix? How do you beat the puzzle?
The fix is simple, but it requires acceptance. You must deliberately budget for 1 night in Kupang in each direction. Do not fight it. Book a clean, simple hotel near the airport or the ferry terminal well in advance. Treat it as part of the journey. And again, this completely enforces our primary rule.
Yeah.
You must treat Rote as a 6 to 7 night minimum trip because the Kupang trap eats 2 of those days.
Trap number 2, the surfboard fee. We just broke down the economics of the $62 Wings Air fee, but there is a much darker secondary layer to this trap that goes beyond money, right? size limits.
Exactly. Wings Air doesn't just charge you, they actively restrict you. Because of the physical dimensions of the ATR-72 cargo door and the angle of the hold, they have severe size limits. If your surfboard is over 6'5" long, which many beginner or larger waveboards are, the ground crew might just flat out refuse to put it on the plane.
Wait, so you could have a confirmed ticket, pay the $62, and they just say no?
Yes, you could be standing at the check-in counter in Kupang watching your flight board while your irreplaceable surfboard is rejected. You are totally stranded.
What is the practical fix for this nightmare?
The absolute safest, most practical fix is to skip the flight and take the fast ferry.
Yeah.
You pay the $2 board fee, you hand it to a guy on the deck, and you don't worry about it. Yes, you accept an extra 2 hours of travel time on the water, but you save $60, and you completely eliminate the anxiety of your board being left on the hot tarmac. If you absolutely insist on flying, you must weigh and measure your board bag obsessively in your living room before you leave home, and pray the check-in agent is in a good mood.
Let's unlock trap number 3, which to me is the most terrifying, the cash and ATM trap. We established that the ATMs in Bas are notoriously empty or completely offline due to power cuts. And we know that once you leave Bas and head out into the villages, the homestays, the local warongs, the scooter rentals, and the taxis operate heavily, almost exclusively in a cash-only ecosystem. They do not have credit card machines. They do not take Apple Pay.
The lived reality of this trap is absolutely brutal. Imagine this scenario. You have navigated the flights, you survived the Kupang overnight, you endured the ferry, and you finally arrive en route exhausted. You walk off the dock, go to the single ATM to get money to pay your taxi driver.
And the screen is blank.
The machine is dead. You cannot pay for your transport to the hotel. Even if you hitchhike to the village, you cannot buy a plate of food because the warong owner doesn't care about your platinum credit card. Topping up cash en route isn't a quick 5-minute errand at a convenience store. It can literally consume half a day of your vacation, riding a scooter back to Ba, hunting for a machine that happens to have freshly loaded rupiah.
It's the ultimate escape room failure. If you skip the cash puzzle, you fail the game before you even reach the beach. You are effectively disqualified from the local economy.
Which means the fix is absolute and non-negotiable. You must withdraw your entire trip's cash budget while you are in the major transit city of Kupang before you get on the ferry or the plane. Sit down, do the math, calculate your daily burn rate, multiply it by your days, add a 20% emergency buffer, and pull that massive stack of cash out of a reliable machine in Kupang. Carry it securely in a money belt. Do not rely on Rote's digital infrastructure.
So we've established that escaping to this island means leaving ATM networks, reliable internet, and direct flights behind. But that isolation has a much darker, much more serious side when things go physically wrong. Let's move to safety, solo travel, and comfort. Day-to-day, human-on-human crime on Rote-like muggings or theft is extremely low. It is a deeply welcoming, community-oriented place, but the environmental risks are incredibly violently high.
The risk hierarchy on Rote is dominated entirely by the ocean and the sheer remoteness. First, the surf breaks. T-land is a world-class wave, but it breaks over a live, shallow, incredibly sharp coral reef. It is a powerful wave. It causes serious lacerations, reef rash, and blunt force injuries every single season.
And the roads.
Second, you have road safety. The roads are variable, some paved, many dirt or gravel. They are often completely unlit at night, and tourists on rented scooters frequently wipe out dodging stray dogs or pigs. And crucially, there is no formal rapid emergency response network. No ambulance is coming to get you on the beach.
But the overarching danger, the thing that should truly terrify people, is the incredibly thin medical cover, right?
Yes. There is no major internationally equipped hospital en route. There are basic local clinics that can stitch up a minor reef cut or dispense basic antibiotics. But if you suffer a severe trauma, say a compound fracture from a scooter crash or a severe head injury on the reef, you must be medically evacuated.
Walk me through what an evacuation actually looks like from an island with no direct flights.
It is a logistical nightmare. First, you have to be stabilized and transported back across the strait to the hospital in Kupang on Timor. If the ferry isn't running because it's night or the weather is bad, you are charting a private speedboat in the dark.
Which is terrifying.
Yeah, and if the injury is genuinely life-threatening or requires complex surgery, Kupang won't be enough. You are looking at a highly expensive air evacuation onward to a major international hospital in Bali, or frequently an international flight out of the country entirely to Darwin, Australia.
That reality has to dictate your entire behavioral baseline on the island.
Absolutely. This is not the place to drink 6 bintangs and learn how to ride a scooter in the dark. This is not the place to paddle out into a massive 8-foot swell if you are a beginner surfer. You must ride with extreme caution, you must know your limits in the ocean, and you must carry premium, ironclad travel insurance that explicitly covers remote medical evacuation.
What about the daily demographics? How does the island feel for different types of travelers? For instance, a solo female traveler.
For solo female travelers, Rote is generally highly regarded in terms of physical safety. And because of the conservative religious nature of the local culture, there is very low street harassment compared to the busier, more chaotic Indonesian hubs like Bali or Lombok. You aren't going to be catcalled walking down the beach. However, because the island is so quiet, so spread out, and lacks a centralized, hostile party scene, a solo traveler might feel a deep, creeping sense of social isolation if they aren't proactively making friends in the surf lineups.
What about families? We said they needed the full board resorts, but what's the vibe outside the gates?
Families are perfectly fine and incredibly safe within the resort tiers where everything is managed. But as we said, trying to improvise local transport with toddlers, trying to get a 5-year-old onto the back of a scooter to go find dinner is tough, bordering on irresponsible. As for nightlife, it is essentially zero. There are no beach clubs, no DJs, no late-night bars. The island goes to sleep shortly after dinner.
And health-wise, beyond the trauma risks of surfing and scooters.
You are deep in eastern Indonesia. It is a tropical, rugged environment. Vector-borne diseases like malaria and dengue fever do exist here, particularly around the wet season. You absolutely must bring high-quality DEE repellent. Use the mosquito nets provided in your room and consult a dedicated travel doctor before you leave home regarding malaria prophylaxis.
I have to ask, though, listening to all of this, the grueling 2-day transit, the fear of empty ATMs, the terrifying lack of a hospital, the isolation, is this structural discomfort actually a selling point? Is this exactly what these travelers are paying for?
It absolutely is. The discomfort is not a bug. It is the ultimate feature. The discomfort is the filter, the lack of a hospital, the empty ATMs, the grueling Kupang overnight. That gauntlet is precisely what keeps the massive casual tourist crowds and the mega beach clubs away. It actively preserves the rugged frontier feel that the surfers and the escapists are so desperately seeking.
Let's transition into the actual emotional experience then. Let's talk about best moments and honest disappointments. Because if a traveler endures the escape room, the Kupang overnight, the board fees and the ATM anxiety, the physical payoff on the island has to be massive.
And according to every source, it truly is. The absolute peak, the best aspect of Rote is unequivocally the surf. T-Land at Nemberala is a legendary mechanical left-hander. When those dry season offshore trade winds are blowing, it delivers incredibly long, predictable, deeply satisfying rides on relatively uncrowded waves.
Which is pretty rare now.
Yeah, that specific commodity-perfect uncrowded surf is virtually extinct in Bali right now. And if T-Land gets too busy in August, you have access to other pristine breaks like Boa, Duo, and Sakis, which naturally spreads the surfers out across the reefs.
But it's not just the waves, is it? What about the non-surfer?
For the non-surfer, the payoff is sensory. You have these sprawling, totally empty white sand beaches. You have a completely unique, arid landscape dominated by thousands of towering lontar palms, which look entirely different from the lush jungles of Bali. You can sit on a quiet porch and listen to traditional sasando music, a beautiful stringed instrument native to the island. You can watch the locals meticulously farming salt and harvesting seaweed in the shallows just as they have for generations. It is deeply authentic. And the barrier to entry is so low, renting a decent surfboard only costs $10 to $25 a day.
But we promised the listener an absolutely honest audit, so we have to tear it down a bit. What are the major honest disappointments?
The biggest disappointment, hands down, is the emotional crash of buying into the next Bali lie. If you arrive expecting cosmopolitan comforts, you will be miserable. There is zero dining variety. You will eat rice and fish. There is no nightlife. But the most insidious disappointment comes from the modern marketing machine. The glossy drone photos you see on Instagram, the sweeping cinematic shots of perfect, empty blue waves completely hide the grueling reality of sleeping in a dusty Kupang transit hotel, and they crop out the sheer anxiety of staring at an empty ATM screen while your taxi driver waits.
The trade-off is incredibly stark. Rote actively, deeply rewards the pure surf seeker and the introvert looking for quiet. But it actively, harshly punishes anyone who shows up looking for a frictionless, full-service, umbrella-drink beach holiday. If you want the ultimate profound solitude, you rent a scooter, skip Nemberala entirely, and head to the eastern beaches during the shoulder months. And please, listener, let me offer you one crucial piece of advice. Never, ever overpay for a structured, guided tour on this island. The very best assets Rote has to offer, the sand, the sea, the incredible sunsets, are effectively free. Just walk outside.
Which leads us to look outward. Let's examine the alternatives. Because Rote isn't the only remote, wave-rich Indonesian island out there. If the logistical gauntlet of Rote sounds too difficult, or if the lack of infrastructure isn't quite right for you, where else in the archipelago should you be looking?
Alternative 1 is fascinating because it's Rote's older, slightly more famous cousin, Sumba.
Sumba is the perfect comparison because it is the closest proxy to what Rote is currently becoming. Sumba is where the original NIHI resort was built, so it has already survived the NIHI effect. It has a deeply rugged, slightly intimidating local culture, famous for the Pasola Festival, which involves mock cavalry battles with spears. And crucially, it has iconic, world-class waves, most notably Oxy's Left, which sits right in front of the NIHI property.
How does Sumba compare on the spreadsheet?
In terms of sheer USD costs, Sumba is broadly similar to Rote at the absolute budget backpacker end. But its mid-range layer, the $50 to $100 bungalows, is generally about 10 to 20% more expensive than Rote's. However, Sumba has a massive logistical advantage. It is slightly easier to reach, it has better, more frequent flight options, and a slightly more developed airport infrastructure.
So who wins?
Ultimately, Sumba wins on overall geographical variety and deep, immersive cultural tourism, but Rote wins out on the specific mechanical consistency of the T-land wave and an overall quieter, slightly less developed feel outside of those peak Australian holiday months.
Okay, alternative 2 is for the absolute purists. The hardcore obsessed surfers. The Mentawai Islands, off the coast of Sumatra.
The Mentawais are the absolute, undisputed global benchmark for uncrowded, world-class, hollow Indonesian surf. If you want the best wave of your life, you go to the Mentawais. But the travel model is entirely, fundamentally different from Rote.
How so? Walk through the mechanics of a Mentawai trip.
Reaching the Mentawais usually requires an incredibly long overnight sea journey from the Sumatran mainland city of Padang. And once you are there, there is very little independent backpacking to be done. You are almost always locking yourself into a specialized lie-board charter boat that roams between the reefs, or you are staying at a highly isolated, fixed-location surf camp. Because of this captured model, you are looking at spending anywhere from $1,500 to well over $3,000 for a strict week-long package.
So the Mentawais absolutely undeniably win on sheer wave density, hollow barrels, and surf quality. But Rote completely destroys the Mentawais on price and absolute traveler independence.
Exactly. On Rote, you are land-based. You are not trapped on a boat with 10 other sweaty guys. You can rent a $20 basic bungalow, eat a $2 plate of spicy noodles in the village, and surf a genuine world-class wave on a shoestring budget. And if you happen to be traveling with a non-surfing partner who just wants to read a book on the beach, Rote is infinitely more flexible and enjoyable than being trapped on a rocking charter boat in the Mentawais for 10 days.
If we connect all of these dots, it paints a really clear picture. Rote sits perfectly in the middle of the Indonesian surf travel spectrum. It elegantly bridges the massive gap between the ultra-luxury and intense cultural depth of Sumba and the hardcore, highly isolated boat jail reality of the Mentawais. We have reached the final stage of our deep dive, the Is It Worth It matrix. Let's deliver the final clean verdicts for every single type of traveler we've discussed, based entirely on the massive amount of data and logistical mechanics we just unpacked.
Let's start with the backpacker. We rate Rote an incredibly strong 8 out of 10. It is absolutely undeniably worth it for a cheap, quiet, wave-rich surf week, living on $25 to $35 a day. It utterly destroys the Mentawais on price and freedom. But you must skip it if you have less than 6 nights to spare, because the Kupang transit will eat you alive.
For the mid-range traveler or the couple looking for a romantic escape, we give it a solid 7 out of 10. It is well worth it if you target the shoulder seasons and secure a comfortable air-conditioned bungalow for $70 to $110 a day. You will get the empty beaches you dream of. But you absolutely must skip it if you are the type of traveler who needs a vibrant nightlife scene or a variety of high-end dining options within walking distance.
For the family, it drops to a 6 out of 10. It is only worth it if you are willing to pay the premium to buy the absolute certainty of a full-board resort. You have to buy your way out of the friction. But you must firmly skip it if you are traveling with very young kids or if you have thin travel insurance, because the severe medical isolation and the reality of a complex evacuation is a critical, non-negotiable concern.
For the luxury traveler, it is a 7 out of 10 and actively rising. It is worth it for that legendary hyper-curated NIHI service, assuming you have the 1,200 plus a night to spend. But you should skip it if you expect the dirt roads, the rolling blackouts, and the cash-only local warungs outside the gates to magically match your villa's 5-star, flawless infrastructure.
Finally, for the digital nomad, a dismal 4 out of 10. It is only worth it if your actual goal is to genuinely, professionally switch off and disappear. Yes, the hard costs might only be $900 to $1,400 a month, but the severe connectivity issues are an absolute career-ending deal breaker. Skip it entirely if you need reliable, fast Wi-Fi for your daily work.
So bringing all this evidence together, what is the final overall verdict? Book carefully. Rote is undeniably worth it, but only for dedicated surfers and patient, quiet seekers who are willing to commit to a full week, who are smart enough to take the $2 fast ferry, and who mentally accept the Kupang transit overnight as part of the adventure. And the urgency to go is right now. 2026 into 2027 is the golden window before the NIHI effect completely explodes land prices and alters the atmosphere across the entire island.
Ultimately, it all comes down to your personal tolerance for friction. Are you genuinely willing to trade a grueling 2-day journey, an empty ATM, and incredibly thin public infrastructure for the reward of empty world-class waves and rock-bottom local living costs?
Which leaves us with one final, slightly haunting thought to ponder as we wrap up this deep dive. If the NIHI effect operates exactly as we expect it to, if it successfully transforms Rote's economy over the next 5 years, pushing property prices into the stratosphere, paving all the dirt roads, and bringing in the massive crowds, where do the dirtbag backpackers and the truly independent $20-a-day surfers get pushed to next? What is the next island in the chain? Are we currently watching the final, fleeting, beautiful days of the true, unpolished Indonesian frontier? If this gave you the honest verdict you needed, follow the show. New episodes drop every day.
That is the honest verdict from Phil and H's.